welcome to Elements of Ayurveda, Empowering Wisdom of Life. I'm your host, Colette, and in this podcast, I hope to empower you to take charge of your own health by sharing the holistic teachings of Ayurveda, the ancient healing tradition from India. We will also discuss topics like health and wellness, nutrition, yoga, fitness, meditation, breath work, and much more, as well as interviewing lots of inspiring people along the way. My humble wish is to help you to connect to your true nature, to Mother Nature, and to each other. If you like the content, be sure to subscribe to the show, and the new episodes will automatically download for you to enjoy. If you're new to Ayurveda, I recommend you listen to the first couple of episodes where I do an introduction to Ayurveda and the mind-body types. I've also set up a Facebook group for us to connect and to support each other, and I'd love for you to join me over at Elements of Ayurveda podcast group. And now, here's the show. Hello, and welcome to Elements of Ayurveda. Today, Amy Wheeler is joining us. Hi, Amy.
Good morning. I'm so happy to be here.
Likewise.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, I always look forward to our conversations. And today is going to be a little tough one. Today I wanted to talk about loneliness and disconnection. And this topic has come up because I was talking with a friend of mine recently and we were talking about loneliness. And I was like, you know what? Amy and I need to discuss this. And we, as we all know, are social beings. And our need for connection is as important as our need for food. It really is a fundamental necessity. And we also know that in our modern world, why we have so many ways, right, of connecting now digitally, that we are even more disconnected and the loneliness epidemic is real. And not only are we disconnecting from each other because we're communicating online rather than meeting in person, we're also disconnecting from our true nature, I believe, and we can talk about that more later, and also from Mother Nature. And this is really huge. This really has a detrimental effect on our holistic health. Amy, what do you think about this topic and how do you see the current state of affairs before I go into talking about some stats that I have here?
When you emailed me and suggested this topic, I thought, oh, this is so needed. I look around at my college students. I look all around us at the despair and the loneliness and the separation that's happening. And in some ways, we couldn't have a more important topic.
Yeah.
So I'm just really thankful that you're willing to go to the dark places as well as the light and really try to be present with that darkness and also maybe provide some ideas and solutions for getting out of the darkness.
Exactly. And it really is an epidemic in today's society. And I did look up some stats because I wanted to see how much of an epidemic it is, because we do hear about it. But I was looking at an article by Lisa Firestone, and she said that in the US, loneliness is at epidemic levels. And a recent Cigna study of 20,000 adults found that nearly half of Americans feel like they are alone. Only slightly more than 50% of the respondents in the survey said that they had meaningful in-person social interactions on a daily basis. And 50% said that they sometimes or always feel that their relationships are not meaningful and that they're isolated from others. And it really affects people of all ages. A study by the AARP showed that more than 42 million U.S. adults aged over 45 suffer from chronic loneliness. And we do think about that age group, that demographic, when we think of loneliness. However, Cigna also did a study that revealed young people between the ages of 18 and 22 were far more likely than senior citizens to report being lonely and in poor health, making them the loneliest generation. Now, it's not just a U.S. thing. Another article I saw by Forbes, it was written by Neil Howe. He said that loneliness is a worldwide problem. And in a recent nationwide survey released in October from the BBC, said that a third of Britons So they were often or very often feeling lonely, and nearly half of Britons over 65 consider the television or a pet their main source of company. In Japan, listen to this stat, in Japan there are more than 500,000 people under the age of 40 who haven't left their house or interacted with anyone for at least 6 months. In Canada, right? In Canada, the share of solo households is now 28%, and across the European Union, it's 34%. Wow. That's just shocking, right?
It is shocking. It is shocking. And, you know, I'm going to have full disclosure and say that when I started thinking about this topic, I thought, well, I'm not lonely. I'm an introvert. I like being alone. And I thought, well, what do I have to say? And then I went and thought back at a prior time of my life when I was extremely lonely. And that basically started in childhood and went all the way through college and beyond, that I felt like I didn't fit in. I felt rejected. I felt unwanted, not seen, not heard, not valued. I didn't belong anywhere. And it was really, really painful to feel that way for so many years, like you just don't fit in anywhere. So I know that feeling. I just had forgotten it because I consciously made a change at some point.
Right. And this conscious change is what I'd like to talk about today as well. And I do think that there is obviously a difference between loneliness and being alone. Being alone sometimes is a choice, and certainly is a choice for our well-being, as sometimes as we're on the path to ourself, to our true nature, that we choose to be alone. But then loneliness is very different. And I did come across a definition of loneliness, which is, I guess, the most broadly accepted definition of it. And loneliness is the distress that results from discrepancies between ideal and perceived social relationships. And that came from the Encyclopedia of Human Relationships. But I do find that word perceived interesting, because I think that we can also feel lonely, right? We think of lonely when we go through a breakup, when we're moving to a new place, when we're not invited to some social events. But we can also feel lonely when we're in company, when we're in a relationship, when, you know, you have lots of people around you, but if you don't feel heard or seen, or you can't be your true self, I think that can cause loneliness as well.
I completely agree. The women that I work with as a yoga therapist are coming to me, and they've been married for 30 years with children and grandchildren, and they are extremely lonely. And you think, well, how is that possible? You've got, you know, people coming in and out of your house. You're, you know, have these meaningful relationships, or so we would say. And it's exactly what you just alluded to, which is they don't feel their true nature, their true self is able to come out and be seen and be valued, even in their family of origin. And it's a very, very lonely place to be.
Yeah, I've certainly felt that in the past, you know, not being able to express myself fully and having to censor myself in relationships, and not being able to speak my truth, and feeling that my beliefs wouldn't be accepted and so on. I've definitely felt that. And it is very lonely. And I think on a very deep level, it can really affect you when you feel that you have to censor everything coming out of your mouth, when you can't speak your truth, when you can't be your true self. It has to have a huge effect on your health and well-being.
I agree. And, you know, I think back to high school where I just didn't feel like I fit in. I mean, I think from the outside, people would have said, oh, Amy's popular. She's a great athlete. She's on the homecoming court, blah, blah, blah. But inside, I had a complete and total disconnect. I felt I didn't have any friends that really cared about me. I felt that, you know, I didn't have the same values as the other kids. I wasn't interested in the things that they were interested in. And, you know, maybe that's perceived, maybe it's real, but it was a very, very dark and lonely time. I would never go back to high school.
Yeah, and it's so tough because we don't have the tools, of course, to deal with it. Unfortunately, if we had Ayurveda younger and yoga, if they had those tools younger and we understood our emotions, we don't get taught about our emotions and how to deal with them. And unfortunately, in our society, we tend to look externally outward to determine who we are and if we're liked and if we're worthy and if we're valuable, and we seek approval and likes on social media to establish our worth. So when we come to things like the world of Ayurveda and yoga, that this starts the process of an internal investigation and a self-study and this journey to self. And this is what I really feel can support us in determining not only what our values are, but if we are an introvert or an extrovert or an introverted extrovert, and what our tendencies are and what we need. Because I remember even feeling weird because I didn't want to go to some social events, and I would question myself when I was younger as to what's wrong with me? Why don't I want to hang out? Or why do I want to spend time by myself? I thought that there was something wrong with me.
I agree. When I learned about Purusha from the yoga philosophy, and when I learned about the different birth constitutions in Ayurveda, and I started to understand who I am at my very deepest self, my Purusha, but also who I am in this world, I was able to let go of the judgment and the negativity about myself and just be present with who I am and how I showed up this time around. And then once I could do that, I could start looking at other people, and instead of judging them and pushing them away, I could start saying, oh, this is their constitution, or this is their imbalance. And we can accept them in their current state and love them. And also know that some people don't feel comfortable to us. And it's not that they're bad. It's just, if you don't get invited or you don't want to go to a party, it's fine, because maybe you just don't match up well with that person's constitution.
Yes, absolutely. And I think acceptance here is important as well, and accepting this situation for what it is, and rather than internalizing it and feeling that there's something wrong with you, and again looking for that external acceptance, right, to feel your worth, that this is where we really need to understand and do the study on ourselves. And we really need to be confident in our decisions and our choices, and also confident in who we are, and that the understanding, of course, that we're not going to be liked by everybody, and we're not going to fit in everywhere. But the more we understand ourselves, our values, our needs, our tendencies, and what serves us, the more we can make those decisions without question, and we can feel comfortable. I know as I've gone through this journey, it's made me more comfortable in my choices. Like, nope, that's not for me. I don't want to do that.
Right. And it allows us to express who we are so that we can find our tribe.
Yeah.
The people who do appreciate our gifts and understand our challenges and flaws. And not that you're only going to hang out with people that are like you, but just to know that there are others out there that have your values, who see you, who hear you, who understand you. And in that way, I know a lot of times social media gets a bad rap, but if you can truly tune into who you are and feel comfortable enough to share it with the world through social media, I've actually met so many amazing friends that I would have never met because we don't live in the same state or country, and I think, once you have the courage to say, this is who I am, and I hope you like it, but if you don't, that's okay too. It is like you can find your tribe. And I think that's what took me from all those years of loneliness to how I am now, where I barely remember what it feels like to be lonely, because I have a tribe of women that I can call and talk to and share with,
Yeah, and I think that is key in loneliness and feeling disconnected, is reaching out and finding like-minded people, and whether it be a yoga class or a meditation class or a spiritual group or some sort of support group, Or be it online, if there's nothing in your town and you don't know anybody you connect to, or you don't feel comfortable connecting with those who are surrounding you, reaching out online can be a great way to do that. And I think it's important. Now, for some people, I do think there's different levels of loneliness, right? And I think I want to respect that there can be a loneliness where it's easy to pull yourself out of, but then there can be a loneliness which can go into more mental disturbances. And from an Ayurvedic perspective, feeling lonely and feeling isolated can be a consequence of an imbalance of the Vata dosha. And that can lead to more mental disturbances, things like depression or anxiety or nervousness. Because of that air and space, there's too much of it. And these elements can really make you feel ungrounded and unable to connect. And looking at some modern research for loneliness, it is shown loneliness can lead to psychiatric disorder like depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, and even hallucinations. And it can go down the road to addictions. And some of these that I just listed are actually indeed a result of a Vata imbalance. So balancing the Vata dosha is particularly important here because, as we said, it's an excess or an aggravation of the Vata dosha that increases the elements of space and air in your body, which can lead to that feeling of isolation, loneliness, sadness, unable to connect with others. So just by balancing the Vata dosha with food and lifestyle and mindfulness practices, it will bring those elements of space and air back into balance. And therefore you will feel more connected. You will be able to handle more social situations because there will be less nervousness and less anxiety. And this is why it's important to make sure our Vata constitution, our Vata dosha is in balance. This is what we'd have to look at as well, is if you're down a very dark road, as it were, into depression, maybe into addiction or more mental disturbances, that it's really a time then that you need more professional help.
Absolutely. I mean, I love what you're saying about it's, degrees, or there's a relative scale, and those of us who have gone to very dark places need professional help. But I also love what you're saying, that when you look at, a not so dark level of loneliness, and you know that it is connected to a Vata imbalance, there's so many things we can do to help bring that down in our own house without even connecting with anyone. We can do a Abhyanga oil massage every day. We can take a warm bath. We can eat warm, unctuous, liquidy foods. We can, get a weighted blanket. There's so many things we can do that will bring the Vata down so that we actually have the courage to enter out into the world and connect with people in a very deep and real way.
Yeah, and this, I think, goes back again to understanding your basic constitution type, but also, again, what serves you, what doesn't serve you, because then you can tune in to when you're feeling this loneliness, when you're feeling this extra space and air elements in your body, and you start feeling that void, that you're so subtly tuned in to your body and to your needs that you realize that, this is my Vata. So what can you do? And like Amy said, with this, it's so many easy things that you can do and bring in. You just need the education around it. And we've talked a lot about balancing Vata in previous episodes. And also, I feel making your home into a cocoon as well. If you're living particularly in an area that's very Vata aggravating, be it with the climate or in your large city, or you're commuting on a subway or in crazy traffic, all that we know is Vata aggravating or a stressful job. So even just creating that home environment that's a cocoon-like, how can you create that balance within your own life?
And I'll just continue on because my home is my cocoon. I don't really have social engagements at my house because I've decided that this is my safe place. And another thing that has really helped me not feel lonely and feel nourished and supported and loved is animals. I think having animals is one of the best ways to reduce Vata in general, but also to reduce loneliness.
Yeah.
And for me, because I had been such an introvert and I did not have good social skills. My husband taught me social skills, but before him, I just didn't have social skills. Oh yeah. Because our family didn't entertain, we didn't have people over. We were very self-sufficient. As kids, we didn't learn how to connect with people outside our big family.
Right.
But the pets were a kind of an intermediate step where I could love and be loved and talk to and be heard and seen and understood. And then, it may sound strange, but for me, that was a step towards learning how to connect with humans. And one of the beautiful things about pets is, especially cats, they'll let you know when you're being inappropriate, when you go pick them up and didn't ask, or when you didn't fulfill your duties to them.
Right.
If you overstep your boundaries, they will let you know. And I would say it's not that different than humans. The only difference is humans oftentimes won't tell you when you've done something inappropriate or wrong. They'll just move away. So I think pets can be a huge step towards decreasing loneliness, towards learning about how to connect, learning about relationships, and also bringing the Vata down.
Yeah, that's really interesting because you've created a cocoon in your home and you have this very stable environment, whereas I am really the opposite. I have lived a very transient life since young, right? I left home at 17, went to the States at 20, and I've moved a lot, and everything has been very transient. And even in my homes, I don't put a lot of effort into my home. So even now when I'm talking about that home cocoon, I'm also telling myself, and that's something that I recognize in myself, and that I need to be aware of, because that could aggravate my Vata and that could create that space and air. And, if everything is very transitional all the time and I have temporary furniture and I don't invest in making the home a real home, because I can live very basically, with just the basics. But that's not necessarily a good thing. I think that it's important to create a stable environment. And as I say this, I'm telling myself, I'm giving myself a lecture here.
Well, and now you're making me remember more times that I'm lonely. Is every single time I travel, as much fun as I'm having on the road. I love to go international. I love to engage with people all over through yoga therapy. But every single night I feel desperately lonely for my husband and my animals and my cocoon at home. It is so interesting. I always feel like I want to be able to split myself into two people and keep one at home and one on the road. But I can kind of understand what you're saying of when you travel, the Vata is high, it's transient, and it may be how some people feel all the time, that they don't have that grounding and that support underneath them.
Yeah, and I remember that year I traveled through Asia alone. I definitely remember periods of loneliness. But as I went on the journey of yoga and Ayurveda, then it was a choice to be alone. And there was a more of acceptance of being alone and not wanting the situation to be something it wasn't, right? And being okay with it. And also for me, I felt it was almost therapeutic, and I was going through my own journey and I needed that time alone and that space to kind of deal with undigested emotions or deal with just myself and to get to know myself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the other thing that I just keep thinking of, I was lonely at this time and that time. I think I was very, very lonely until really I met my husband, because sometimes it's easy to feel that you're kind of flapping out there in the wind without anybody else on earth that really, really has your back. Whether that's a best friend or a parent or a spouse. I think we all need someone that has our back. that we can call in the dark night of the soul and cry.
Yeah.
And if we don't have that, for me, it can feel like a very lonely place to be.
Yeah, when you feel unsupported, and I've definitely felt that in my life too. When you feel unsupported, it can be very, very hard because you do need someone out there who has your back. And, if you've been let down and people have said, yeah, I'm there for you, and you've been let down, that's hard too. And I think then that wall kind of goes up, right? That to guard your emotions for the future, and then you're less likely to allow people in because you've been let down before. And that's a vicious cycle too.
Right. And then someone who may actually be very supportive and loving and kind gets a completely different message from you because your wall is up.
Right.
And they go on their way.
Right. Exactly. And they just think that you're not approachable, or they just get to feel that energy from you. So there comes in vulnerability, and to be very vulnerable with each other. And again, that creates a greater connection. And I think that's important to do that with those people around you, or if you don't have anyone around you, like you said, Amy, go seek some places online where you can chat with others, because I think even just expressing it is a release.
Absolutely. I have a friend that had basically, been hiding her gender orientation from her family and her friends for many, many years. And she was very lonely because she felt she didn't belong, that people wouldn't value her anymore, that they might emotionally blacklist her or reject her or abandon her. So she was kind of playing this false life, pretending to be what everybody wanted her to be as a good little Christian girl. But she just felt so lonely. And so she had an entirely separate life online with people who were transitioning their gender, and they understood her, they saw her, she belonged to their group, and they valued her and checked up on her. And it was very interesting to see that finally, when she had the courage to move out of state, away from her family of origin and the way she was brought up, she's thriving and flourishing now in real life, not just online, right? So I think this belonging and having other people understand you at your deeper layers of your being, I think there's just I long for that.
Yeah.
I think that somehow we all need that.
Yeah, because I think any surface relationships, superficial relationships are just, they're just not nurturing, and they just leave us feeling so empty.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's hard if you're surrounded by those relationships that you feel are not connecting, and you're not getting into conversations where you can really express yourself, and you have to keep it surface level. I think that is so hard.
Okay, but we have to admit, Colette, that you and I are like top level introverts, so we go to the party and we find one person and talk to them all night.
That's true.
There are extroverts out there that actually, I mean, I'm assuming, I've never experienced this, but they go and they have a lot of superficial, fun, entertaining relationships, and actually maybe do feel nourished and not lonely. I mean, don't you think that's possible?
Of course, yes, maybe it's possible. I don't know. I don't understand it. I understand it on a level that, yes, there's some people who don't want to get into the deep conversations and like to be, the busy bee going around and having lots of different conversations. But I don't know if they're nourished by those superficial relationships. I don't think those surface level conversations are nourishing.
Well, we need to get one of them on the call and ask, because, I mean, when you look at things like the Myers-Briggs, personality profiles, there are extroverts that in their free time to get filled up again, they want to be around a whole lot of people.
All right. So they
right?
get energy from people.
That's how they recover and rest, is to be with people, and they don't want to be alone. They don't want to be, in quiet, contemplative conversation, right? So it's interesting. I think we're all unique.
So could we say that a person like that, who gets energies from others, who likes to be in a lot of different conversations and around a lot of people, are more Vata-like?
I think so. And
I think so too.
Just from what I've seen, I mean, I'm just observing from the outside, it almost seems like when things get quiet and they're sitting with themselves, they get maybe uncomfortable or bored, or like there's things that come up that they don't want to think about, or now, we can't say this about all people. That's why we need to invite an extrovert to talk with us. But that's just been my observation, that
mine too.
It's almost like the conversations with so many people is almost a distraction from what they're really feeling inside sometimes.
Right. So therefore, just going on this example, right, riffing on this, that if a person with a high Vata constitution likes this external and receiving this external energy, doesn't like to be quiet and still, therefore, if they're constantly seeking energy outside themselves and putting themselves in social interactions, it can be aggravating for their Vata dosha, which means that it's not nourishing and nurturing, it's more depleting. Do you know what I'm saying? So that goes back to the point earlier, that can these superficial conversations be nurturing? And going on the basis that if it's a Vata person, being too active, being too out there, being too social can be aggravating. So therefore, it'd be more depleting.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm playing devil's advocate a little bit here.
Yeah,
I do know some extroverted people that actually have a lot of very deep relationships with people they super care about. So they look like they're flitting all over the place, but you talk to their college roommate and they are bonded at the heart, even though they haven't talked in 3 years, right? So I do think that's a possible.
That's true.
Way to be also.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, like maybe it's just a different type of relationship.
Yeah, and it's deep. It's just different than your and my version of deep.
Right.
Yeah.
But again, it comes back to just understanding yourself. But it's just interesting to think about it and to look at the different ways of being. And of course, having, everybody's unique and everybody has their own way of doing it. But the most important thing is understanding yourself and what your needs are, and making sure that you're feeling that your needs are met.
And also, when we have these times of rejection or abandonment, which will inevitably happen, are we so comfortable in our skin that whatever is being said about us, we either know it's not true, or we know it's true and we've chosen to be that way, right? And it's just fine with us what they're saying. I just think that I'm at a point now where being rejected or abandoned or having someone talk badly about me, it throws me off for a little bit. But once I contemplate what they've said and decide if there's any truth or not, or if I need to work on that or not, once I get over that emotional digestion period, a lot of times I feel like I can stand up and say, no, that's not me. You don't know what you're talking about. Or, yes, that is me, and I'm damn proud. So I think getting to this point where you know yourself so well is really important. And one of my teachers in India told me that is the true definition of Shanti. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. You have such peace within yourself. You know yourself, you love yourself, that you're just totally at peace with whatever would come up for you.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful thing, and that's what we hope for everybody. And I do think that there is a fine line between digesting that and accepting it and feeling strong within yourself to go, this is who I am, and moving on, versus, again, going back to that, putting that wall up. So I think we really have to analyze within ourselves is, have I moved on? Or have I just moved on and put a little wall up around my heart because I'm afraid of getting hurt again or been let down? Or have I actually digested this in a healthy way and be able to move on without any repercussions going forward?
Right. Yeah. And deciding who it is you are and you want to be in the world, and just really being stable in yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, again, it goes back to doing that journey to yourself and taking time to go inward for a while and really study yourself. Like I've said before, what better study is there to do? And then when you're ready, when you're feeling strong, then coming out and making those decisions about how you want to live and what's best for you and so on. But there has to be a time of that self-study to really be able to stand firm in those choices.
Well, and I would argue it's really a prerequisite to building the community that you want to belong to. Because if we don't know who we are, if we're like a chameleon that just changes our color for the next person that comes along, we're never going to find the people that reflect back to us that we are valuable, we are worthy, we are seen, we are heard, we are appreciated. We're going to be kind of like a ping pong ball, trying to get external acceptance instead of radiating from the inside. This is who I am. Is there anybody that likes this and wants to connect with me from my deepest layers?
Right, exactly. And that's a beautiful way of being. And, I kind of want to discuss the other doshas as well, because we talked about Vata, and I just don't want to give Vata a hard time. I also want to go to the other doshas as well, because when we think about it, really, like Kapha, when Kapha's imbalanced, there's a tendency for withdrawal, right? There's a tendency for withdrawal from social activities, isolation, and that loneliness. And it can become very tamasic, as we've talked about before, the lethargy, the feeling of inertia. And I feel for Kapha, this is really as a choice to be alone, not wanting to deal and not wanting to digest those emotions. There can be a lot of pushing down the emotions. What do you think of that?
I relate to that way more than the Vata. I mean, like I said, I have the Vata loneliness when I travel, but the times where I get stuck in my house in Kapha derangement and just do not have any desire to connect because I'm so heavy and negative and lethargic, that's a rough place to be, because the things that would help us get out of that, we don't have the motivation to do, like go for a hike or, get some movement. It's like you're stuck, you're in this mud puddle. Yeah. And in order to go connect again, you need to do self-care practices that will get you unstuck and moving. And it's hard to do from the blue zone. I think maybe the best scenario for that is to find a good friend or someone that's willing to walk with you every morning and kind of set you up for the day with some good movement.
Right. Get that Pitta or Vata friend to give you some of that, their fire. The Pitta fire and the Vata wind will get you moving. Yeah, exactly. Because it can be hard to pull yourself out of that, especially if you're very tamasic and really feeling that heaviness and sluggishness. It can be hard. So, and it takes courage to go out there and to set up those dates, but it is really important. And for a Kapha person who's feeling that isolation, it really means setting up dates with friends or going to a class where you can get energy from others.
And I have to say, Vata and Pitta friends get tired of the negativity and the heaviness and the sluggishness, and then, glass is always half empty for the whole walk. So one of the things that a Kapha deranged person is going to have to do is not go on the walk and complain the whole time and, see everything as so dark. If your friend is going to come over to get you to walk, then you need to do your part and try to find some goodness and lightness and, appreciation for the fact that they're willing to come walk with you.
Yeah, so true. So true. So for any coffee person out there who's listening and feeling like, I know I'm socially withdrawing, I know I'm isolating myself, really would be great to start setting up some meetings with friends or just going to some classes where you can get that energy from the group and you can feel inspired. And also, of course, looking at your food and looking at what in your lifestyle is creating more heaviness and how can you lighten that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then for Pitta, sorry, did you have something else to add there?
No,
Okay.
I was just going to say it's an inside job.
It is an inside job.
The problem I see with myself and others who have too much kapha imbalance is we just can't get motivated to do it for ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's hard.
It is hard. And I think when you're very stuck in the tamasic mud, as I see it, I think you may need help. So even like a reset, this is what I recommend. It's someone to support you through a reset in Ayurveda, we would look towards cleansing because that will really reset everything. And then from that, you bring in a support structure of daily practices and lifestyle and exercise and so on. And you rebuild a new lifestyle around that. But sometimes if it's very heavy energy, that you do need some help and to lighten things up, and you need that support to pull you out of it, because that could be a dark hole.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then for Pitta, for me, I think Pitta, I would see more disconnection, that they get so involved in their work or their exercise, so into controlling things that they isolate themselves because they're so fixated on something. I know I've experienced that before.
I never have.
I'm thinking like when I was, training, just before I did the Panchakarma. This is when I was really burnt out, but I was training like for the Ironman in Nice, and everything was like training and exercise and just completely focused and not going out so much, and everything was obsessive and controlling about this training. Yeah. And I could see myself isolating myself then because I was just so single pointed focused on one thing, and not in a good way.
Right. And I mean, I remember times in the past where I was so deeply wanting to be accepted and loved, but my strategy was that I'm going to be perfect. I'm going to climb to the top of the ladder. I'm going to be ambitious. I'm going to be such an amazing, professor or whatever I wanted to focus on, that then people will love me.
Right.
And in fact, it's the opposite. You're so ambitious and so aggressive and so one-pointed focused that you turn everybody else off. Right. And they don't care about your credentials or your accomplishments. What do they care? That's like not important to them. And so for the Pitta person to realize, look, we need joy in the journey. We need good friends to go along this path with, that the credentials and the ambitious activities are going to fade. And in fact, nobody will ever remember them.
Right.
Or maybe not even care about them in the first place, or maybe even be turned off by them in the first place.
Yeah.
Those things are not what you take with you to the grave. You take with you the impact you made on people, personally, through the heart, the relationships you had, the kindness you shared. I think sometimes Pittas think they're going to get acceptance and love, but they have a very messed up strategy to get that.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of control going on. And I think as well, for me, I think Pittas can sometimes think, I can do it all. I don't need anyone's help. I got it. I don't need to show my weaknesses to others. I know that was for me in the past. I was like Miss Independent. I can do everything. I don't need anybody's help. And it was only through breaking down those walls and opening up to people and saying, yeah, I don't have it together. I don't have a clue what I'm doing, and being more vulnerable, that then I'm like, oh my God, this is so much better when I'm like, tell people what's wrong and I really open up and share. Then the connections are so much stronger than they're sharing with me. And you feel like you have more of a bond and you can support each other.
Right. And it just feels better to be a little vulnerable and give and receive empathy and know that we're all human. I have this one gentleman at work that I've seen him for probably 10 years. His office is just a few doors down from mine, and he is so pitta, and the way he walks, and he doesn't even look up to say hello in the hallway, and he's just on a mission. And I just want to like grab him and hug him and say, honey, come on now.
Enjoy the journey.
Exactly. It's not that serious.
Yeah. And that is a shame as well that if we go through life with that pitta intensity, because we miss out on so much. So there has to be a softening there. So each of us, with our different ratio of doshas, have to do that, look at how we are, how we deal with loneliness or disconnection. Are we really looking inward and finding what our values are and being comfortable and then also having awareness of others around us. So again, we do the self-study, but then we have to open up to the world, right? We always say this, it's important not to be so insular and studying yourself all the time. You need to look outward and having awareness of others around you who are isolating themselves or who may be lonely and, doing a kind of an intake of like what's going on around you. Haven't you heard from in a while? What's going on with them? Are they isolating themselves and having that awareness that of others as well?
Right. I think when I first started studying Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, it seemed so self-centered to me because it doesn't talk a lot about what are you going to do with this state of balance that you've created for yourself? And I don't know, it just seemed like, I just thought, well, what's the point of, you spend all this time on yourself doing meditation, but then what do you do with it? Right. And I've just come to understand that that's the first step. And we are here to be of service to humanity. We are here to grow together and love together and reach to the light together. But sometimes you do have to do your internal work before you're able to contribute to society. But don't get stuck there. Don't stay there. Know that that's just part of the journey towards being a member of humanity that cares about Mother Earth and all that's happening in the world or the universe.
Right. I think that's very important because sometimes we will not be of help unless we have figured ourselves out first. And also, I don't think that we will see or have awareness of others suffering unless we have studied ourselves first. And, if we go through the journey of yoga and Ayurveda, we're more aware of the tendencies of the different types, constitution types, and we can spot when somebody is isolating or where somebody is like the spinning top and going, and a lot of nervous energy and maybe more anxiety prone, or when somebody is headstrong and just not stopping to smell the roses. So I think that, yes, it has to be the study first, but then opening up, and so you can have the awareness and then know how to help others as well.
Right. As I run my business, I know that when I work really closely with someone, they have to be a similar constitution than me, to me. That if I choose someone with a totally different constitution, it's not going to work. Right. So it's to the point where to make my contribution to the world effectively, I actually include the Ayurvedic birth dosha and lifestyle imbalance in my interview, whether they know it or not.
Right.
It's part of what I'm looking at, because I know that if I get too caught up in drama and too caught up with someone who hasn't done their work, unfortunately, it's going to stop me from being of service to all the people that I would like to contribute to.
Right. And how beautiful is that you have those guidelines to go on, and that you're not going to be going into a working relationship or any relationship where you're going, oh my goodness, like how you're just managing the differences day in, day out and not getting the work done. For people out there who are feeling disconnected, who are feeling this sense of loneliness, I think first identifying where these feelings are coming from. Is it an imbalance? Is it an imbalance of Vata, Pitta, or Kapha? Is it feeling like you can't express your true self? Has it gone to a more serious level where there may be some addictions, be it to food, drugs, alcohol, control. There can be many types of addiction, right? And I think the first thing is identifying it and then seeking the help, whether it be professionally or through friends, and opening up and being more vulnerable, because loneliness, it can lead to serious problems, and I think it should be taken very seriously. And I think now that we're talking about it more in our society, it's a good thing. But loneliness is trauma. You know, when people don't feel connected, the body really shuts down. And it's not just, you know, emotionally, but also our health can really be affected by this. And it can have huge effects on our health and well-being.
Yeah, there's so many research studies out there. My friend Marlisa Sullivan often presents on this, how loneliness affects both mental and physical health outcomes. And there's hardcore data to support this.
Yeah. Yeah, so, and even if you feel like you're not suffering from loneliness per se, again, like we said, having awareness of those around you, but also making sure that you have social connections. You know, particularly if you're working for yourself or you're working for home, how, you know, myself, I work from home, but how many social interactions do you have in a day? You know, when do you get out of the apartment or house and meet with others and have real exchanges? And I think that's important to look at as well, that it's so important to have that regular social interaction.
Absolutely. I had a client many years ago that her husband had died and she worked out of her house. And I said, okay, I want you to join a gym and I want you to start going to group yoga class. And she said, well, I have a treadmill, I have a bike, right. I have my own yoga practice. And I said, that's not the point.
Yes,
the point is you need to go be around people. And then she said, well, I just go in there and put my mat out and then I don't talk to anybody and I leave. So why bother? And I said, because eventually you're actually going to make eye contact and say hello to someone and have tea afterwards. So get out of the house, girl.
Right. And even energetically, even if you don't feel up to talking to anybody, it's even just the energy of being in that environment. Or if you are an introvert and you feel very shy about making the first word in a conversation, even just going to a group class and being in that energy, I think is beneficial.
Uncomfortable. Absolutely, but necessary.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
So, you know, thank you for talking to me about this.
Thank you for inviting me. It was one of the ones I had to prepare for most, to really think deeply about why and when and how we experience loneliness. And I think it's such an important topic that very few people are talking about. So thank you.
Yeah, and I think it's different for everybody. And I think that's why we need to kind of do our own little research on ourselves and see, how am I feeling, and really get in touch with those emotions. Because I think it's one emotion that we can suppress so easily for various ways. Making our calendars really busy, food, like I said, you know, addicted to alcohol, drugs, whatever it is, we can really suppress it quite easily by being busy, and or throwing ourselves into work or exercise or whatever it is. But really looking at your life and seeing if there's a balance, and seeing if there's, you know, if there's a lack of that social interaction and what you can do about it. So thank you everyone for listening in. I hope it was helpful, and I'd love, you know, to hear from you. Of course, we always have the group that you can share in, the Elements of Ayurveda podcast Facebook group. It's a nice supportive group if you want to share stories over there, or maybe changes that you made that helped when you were feeling lonely. I think that could be really helpful for others. Or if you're extroverted Vata, that, you know, obviously myself and Amy are not, that you can share your side of the story. So Amy, thank you again. I really appreciate you coming on and talking about this and sharing with us.
Thank you so much, Colette.
Take good care of yourself, my dear, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Ciao. So I hope you enjoyed that chat with Amy on loneliness and disconnection, a very important subject for us to discuss within our own friends groups and families and so on. If you would like support, if you feel that you need some support of getting out of a rut of loneliness, please reach out, and I will put the link in the show notes to my website. And like I said, if you want to share your experiences, you can do so over on the Elements of Ayurveda podcast Facebook group. That link will be in the show notes also. I also want to let you know about my upcoming retreat that's happening October 11th to the 13th, 2019. It's a weekend retreat, and it's happening right here on the Côte d'Azur. In between Nice and Monaco is the village I live in called Villefranche-sur-Mer. And it's very close to Nice. It's only 7 kilometers, which has an international airport. But it would be great to see you here. We're going to focus for 3 days on food as medicine, lifestyle medicine, and mindfulness medicine. And there's going to be a lot of connection and fun and healing and education as well. So I'll put that link in the show notes also. It would be wonderful to see you here. If you feel this episode would help anybody in your family or friends group, please share it with them. And it would be great just to spread the word and start this conversation. Take good care of yourself, be well, and I hope to connect with you soon. Ciao for now.